This is a presentation about symbols of royal power in ancient Egypt. Most of the items we'll be talking about in this presentation are known as regalia. This is a term for items which represent the reigning status of a king or similar. Typical examples of regalia include crowns, scepters, and ceremonial weapons. The first item we'll look at is known as the was scepter. A diverse symbol, it was a sign of Pharaoh's power over chaos. It was usually a scepter held by the god Seth. The scepter was also the symbol of the later royal capital, Thebes, which was known by the Egyptians as Wast, literally the city of the scepter. The term was means dominion or control. Here is a depiction of the jackal-headed god of the dead, Anubis, holding the was scepter. Here is an actual artifact of the was scepter, this particular one made of a semi-precious stone called faience. The sekhem was another symbol of royal authority, this one representing power. It was used in many contexts, but many early kings, like Sekhemket, used the term within their names. This is an image which shows the god Anubis, in this case flanked by the Sekhem scepter. The mace was one of the most simple but long-lasting symbols of royal power in Egypt. It was a traditional fighting implement used to break the skulls of the enemy. The figure of the pharaoh smiting his enemy was one which would last for time immemorial, as is shown in this picture and also in this much later relief carving on a temple wall. The next symbols are known as the heka, or the crook, and the nekaka, the flail, which were ancient symbols of royalty and power. The crook represented the shepherd's crook and is thought to symbolize the ability of the pharaoh to guide his people. The flail, which was effectively a fly swat, was apparently meant to represent the fertility of the land of Egypt. Initially, these two started off as separate, but came to be indivisible in later times. The two here are those that were found in the tomb of the late and very famous king Tutankhamun. This is a depiction of the great god Osiris holding the heka and nekaka. Dating from earliest times, the serek was the ceremonial writing of the name of king. It was a stone outline with the symbol of the royal god Horus. Under this would be the actual name of the king, mounted on the Per-Ah symbol, that of the great house of the king. This symbol fell into disuse in later times. The shinu, or cartouche, was the replacement for the serek. The shinu came to be used from the reign of King Sneferu onwards, and was an elongated version of a ring worn by the king. In it contained the king's prenomen, or throne name, his title, son of Ra, also known as the Sa-Ra title, and also his actual birth name. It symbolized the sacred nature of the king's name, and would be used for all kings from this point on. Some of the most famous symbols of the king were undoubtedly his crowns. Despite this, none have actually ever been found, and we have absolutely no idea what they were made of. The hedjet, a white crown, was associated with the powerful city of the pre-dynastic period, Nekhen, which is also known as Hierakonpolis. It was famously depicted in the Nama palette. The Deshret crown was also depicted, and was associated with the city of Lower Egypt, Sais, whose goddess Neith was supposed to have worn it. Eventually the two crowns were combined into one and came to be known in Greek as the Peshent, but the Egyptians knew it as Sekhemti, or the two powerful ones. The crown may have come into existence with the beginning of the Egyptian state. The Kepresh, also known as the blue or war crown, was a much later invention. It was made of blue leather with golden discs and is commonly worn by the kings of the 18th dynasty onwards. The final crown, the Artef, was mainly shown on the god Osiris and symbolized balance, justice, and morality. It was, it seems, derived from the hedjet crown, which you can see in the center of the two ostrich plumes. The symbol of the uraeus was an ancient one, which related to both the hedjet and deshret crowns. The vulture goddess, Nekhbet, was one of the protective forces of the ancient city of Nekhen, from which the conquering pharaohs had originated. The goddess Wadjet of Sais, or another city, Buto, in the Nile Delta, was the protective spirit from that region. This symbol came to be a sign of both the protection for the pharaoh, but also of the power of the king. Many inscriptions, for instance, refer to the searing power of the king's uraeus. This pharaoh here is a wall carving, and it's shown wearing the kepresh, and also with the uraeus on his brow, this time just a singular uraeus. This particular pharaoh is shown with the Artef crown. During the Middle and New Kingdom, the god Amun of Thebes became the most prominent and widely worshipped god. The so-called Amun crown was actually just two large ostrich plumes. This crown was used more to identify the god rather than the king himself, but it's worthy of note here. Sphinxes, with the head of a human and the body of a lion, were powerful symbols of protection used for the kings of Egypt. The Great Sphinx of Giza is definitely the most famous, but literally thousands of these were used to offer symbolic defense for all manner of royal sites, particularly tombs and temples. The nemes was a headdress rather than a crown and was made of striped fabric tied at the back. The earliest one is shown on the warrior pharaoh Den from the earliest dynastic period, but the most famous is from this death mask of Tutankhamun, which is shown here and in reverse here. The ankh was a highly universal symbol in Egypt. A popular amulet, it reflected life and vitality. It is often shown being held by the gods, but it was also a symbol of the spiritual power of Pharaoh. Here, the goddess Isis touches an ankh to the mouth of the dead pharaoh, symbolically reanimating his mouth for speech. Finally, there are common items of pharaonic costume, including the kilt, shemset, fake beard, and bull's tails. The kilt was common enough, although the king himself wore one that was probably heavily decorated with an apron known as the shemset. The beard, likely made of horsehair and woven through with gold, was a symbol of manly power and the king's virility. The clean-shaven kings wore this tied around their heads. The bull's tail was an ancient symbol of the fertility and might of the king, equating him with bulls, a powerful and masculine animal. Collectively, all of this image and all of these symbols represent one thing: the power of the king.